He's not a violent guy who's talking to people on college campuses. Wasn't even particularly rude. Who's tried to be pretty reasonable with people.
Everything I saw seemed reasonable.
He's a very intelligent guy.
Yeah.
You know, whether you agree with him or don't. And there's a lot of stuff that I didn't agree with him on. That's fine. You're allowed to disagree with people without celebrating the fact they got
But you can't disrespect his passion.
Yeah.
The moment Erika Kirk stepped into court and spoke up for Tyler Robinson, everything shifted fast. And even Joe Rogan didn't stay quiet about it. That single move flipped the entire narrative in a way nobody expected. What used to be quiet doubts instantly turned into loud reactions. And people weren't just watching anymore. They started questioning everything in real time. Now the focus isn't just on what happened in that courtroom. It's why Charlie's own family is reacting like this is a version of her they've recognized for a long time. This reaction didn't build slowly either. It hit all at once. The second Erika Kirk stood there and began defending Tyler Robinson, people froze. Not just because of her words, but the way she delivered them. There was no visible panic, no hesitation, just a calm tone that didn't seem to match how serious the situation felt. She referred to him as a young man, highlighted parts of his background, and then went even further, saying he shouldn't be pushed aside or judged unfairly because of who he is. Then came the moment that really made everything explode. She didn't just speak privately, she made it public. She said she forgave him and even shared that she prays for him. That right there is what flipped the entire situation upside down. Because forgiveness on its own is one thing, but saying it like that, in that setting, about someone connected to her husband's passing, is what made people stop, rewind, and look at everything differently, including Joe Rogan. Now, Joe Rogan isn't someone who reacts to everything, but when this started spreading, his response was anything but quiet. He questioned the tone, the timing, and most importantly,
let anyone disenfranchise you because you're a young man. Especially a young white male man. Don't ever let anyone talk down to you. We need strong men out there. Strong men who are convicted, that will be good leaders, good husbands, good fathers like mine. We need that. And young women, we need you to also rise up. Don't compromise yourself. Don't look at other women and compare yourself. God has created you for a purpose and a reason far greater than you and I will ever know on this side of heaven. But just know that as long as you're a part of Turning Point USA, you have us by your side, and we will be there for you every step of the way.
What kind of mindset would lead someone to defend a person in that position so openly? He even threw out a sharp comment, asking if this felt like some kind of performance, like an acting gig, and followed it up by wondering who would even ask for something like that in the first place. And then he touched on what a lot of people had been thinking, but never really saying out loud. Some started speculating about her role in a much bigger way, questioning whether her position in the relationship was exactly what it seemed on the surface. That's when this situation stopped being just about a courtroom moment and turned directly toward Erika herself. Once the initial shock faded, people began connecting it to everything that had already been building. Past inconsistencies, shifting narratives, and the way her story seemed to change over time. Now bring in Charlie's family, because while the internet was reacting instantly, those closest to him didn't seem surprised in the same way, and that made their response hit even harder. Reports and insider talk had already hinted at tension behind the scenes. His parents are still processing the loss and trying to understand everything, while now watching this unfold publicly. And then there's his sister, who had already shown discomfort before, especially with how certain moments were handled and presented after everything happened. So when Erika stepped into that courtroom and spoke the way she did, it didn't feel like a one-time moment to them.
Let anyone disenfranchise you because you're a young man. Especially a young white male man. Don't ever let anyone talk down to you. We need strong men out there. Strong men who are convicted, that will be good leaders, good husbands.
It felt like a pattern continuing. This isn't the first time people have questioned the difference between how Erika presents herself and what later comes to light. If you go back to the time before Charlie, a completely different version of her starts to appear. There are public moments, past relationships she later pushed back on, and footage showing a lifestyle that doesn't fully match the image she eventually built. Clips show her out in New York City, socializing, attending events, and living a very public, high-energy life. Not just once, but over and over again. There were statements that painted one picture, while visible proof seemed to suggest something completely different. She presented herself as separate, disciplined, guided by faith, almost set apart from everything else. And that's where things really start to connect. Because when someone has a history of reshaping their story, people don't just look at current actions as isolated moments anymore. They start seeing a pattern, something bigger forming behind the scenes. Now bring Joe Rogan back into this, because his reaction didn't just stay focused on the courtroom, it went deeper. He pointed toward the idea that behavior like this doesn't just appear out of nowhere. He wasn't making direct claims, but he was clearly questioning things. Why did the tone feel off? Why show that level of empathy toward Tyler in that moment? Those questions alone were enough to get people thinking in a completely different direction. He also mentioned that her actions didn't come across the way many would expect from someone dealing with a heavy personal loss. And once that perspective started spreading, people went back and started rewatching everything. Old clips, interviews, public appearances, even the way Erika had spoken about Charlie before began to feel different when seen through this new lens. That shift in perception is exactly what sparked such a strong reaction from Joe Rogan. Looking back at Charlie through all of this,
thing that people want, right? That attention, fame thing.
Yeah.
That is what they really want. Okay, so Jamie will find it.
She's got fireworks behind her. She's wild.
Erika Kirk CIA video releases serious questions.
That's the one I just played.
Yeah.
It had a...
One thing keeps standing out. The way he spoke about Erika, the way he described her, the image he seemed to believe in. When you place that next to everything coming out now, it raises a quiet but powerful question. Did he truly see this version of her? Or was he seeing something completely different? That gap between those two versions is what people are trying to figure out, and it's also what his family is reacting to the most. It's not just about that courtroom moment anymore, it's everything surrounding it. The tone, the decisions, the direction things have taken since he's been gone. And for them, this isn't just public discussion, it's deeply personal. They're still processing the loss, still dealing with unanswered questions, and now on top of that, they're watching the person closest to him publicly defend the man connected to what happened. That's not something anyone just processes overnight and moves on from. It stays, it builds, and it raises even more questions that haven't been answered yet. So now everything circles right back to that one moment in the courtroom. And the deeper people look at it, the less simple it feels. What at first seemed like a clear, emotional statement, something rooted in forgiveness, quickly turned into something far more complex in the eyes of the public. Because it wasn't just about what was said. It was about how it was said, where it was said, and who was listening when it happened. At the surface level, you could say it was a personal decision, a moment where someone chose to respond with calm instead of anger, with words instead of silence. But that's not how it was received by everyone watching. For many, it felt layered, almost like there was more behind it than what was being shown. And once that idea started spreading, it didn't slow down. It picked up speed. Because when reactions start coming in from different directions at the same time...
5-second clip and the rest was not.
Oh, but the full video's out there. I watched it, and it's very weird.
So it's the same video.
So see if you play it. It's about EMP attacks and power grids.
The whole rest of this was not that clip.
None of it?
Nope.
Well, a gig's a gig. I think if you're a struggling actor, you take any kind of employee video or whatever.
I guarantee you that video's out there. I mean, no one could have pulled it. Well, there's the Jimmy Dore video there. Here it is. Here it is. Look at this.
Extremely vulnerable that we've presented to congressional officials. One being cyber, two being...
It changes the way people interpret everything. When Joe Rogan steps in and openly questions the tone and delivery, it immediately brings more attention. His reaction didn't come across as casual or dismissive. It came across as someone trying to understand why the moment felt off to so many people. And when that kind of reaction goes public, it gives others permission to start asking the same questions. Then you add in Charlie's family, and that's where things take an even more serious turn. Because while the internet reacted with shock, confusion, and debate, the people closest to him didn't seem caught off guard in the same way. Their reaction didn't feel like it came out of nowhere. It felt like it came from somewhere deeper. And that's what made people stop and think even harder about everything that's been happening. When those two forces combine, public voices raising questions and family members showing visible concern, it creates a shift. It moves the conversation away from just a single moment and turns it into something bigger, something that people start analyzing from multiple angles. And once that shift happens, there's no going back to seeing it as just a simple act of forgiveness. That's when past and present begin to overlap in a way that's hard to ignore. Because people don't just look at what's happening now, they start revisiting everything that came before it. Old interviews, past statements, previous appearances, moments that didn't seem important at the time suddenly start getting a second look. And when viewed through this new perspective, some of those moments begin to feel different.
Hackers. 3 being physical threats. 4th one is solar EMP, and the 5th one is man-made EMP. So the concern that we have is that we put out this critical information, and when we go over this risk analysis, they hear what we're saying, but they don't want to take action. Take action.
Well, there are 18 critical infrastructures.
It's weird, but
very weird. She's doing a CIA informational video.
Weird. Like an acting gig, or is this something?
It's not that the past changes, but the way people interpret. It does. Small details that once seemed normal start standing out. The tone of certain conversations, the way certain ideas were presented, even the timing of past decisions. All of it starts to come together in a way that feels connected. And whether that connection is real or just perceived, it's enough to keep the conversation going. At the same time, there's another layer that can't be ignored: the emotional weight of everything for Charlie's family. Because for them, this isn't just a topic being discussed online. This is personal. This is something they're living through, something they're still trying to process. And when you're in that position, every public moment carries a different kind of impact. They're not just watching from the outside. They're watching as people revisit the past, question the present, and try to piece together a story that still feels incomplete. And on top of that, they're seeing someone who was close to Charlie take a public stance that many didn't expect. That's not something that fades quickly. It lingers, it builds, and it raises even more questions. And that's why their reaction matters so much, because it doesn't feel like it's driven by attention or headlines. It feels grounded in something real. Whether it's concern, confusion, or something else entirely, it adds weight to the situation in a way that changes how people see everything. Then there's the timing of it all, which only adds another layer of complexity. Why did this moment happen the way it did? Why was it delivered in such a public and direct way? Because timing plays a huge role in how something is received. The same words said in a private setting might have landed completely differently.
Perhaps, or, but even so, you're doing an acting gig for the CIA. Who calls you for that?
Yeah.
You ever get one of those calls?
No.
No, I never got one of those calls.
And my agent never hit me with that one.
Yeah. It's odd. Well, there's a lot of people that think that she was his handler. She was Charlie Kirk's handler. But of course, there's a lot of people that think I have handlers.
Yeah.
Well,
you got about 9 Navy SEALs out there.
They're not. They're my friends. They're not handlers. I know those guys.
Okay. Well, they're tough dudes.
You think they are? They are tough dudes.
Yeah. They know some stuff.
There's a lot of kooks out there.
But in a courtroom, in front of an audience, with everything already under a spotlight, it creates a completely different impact. That's what keeps bringing everything back to the same set of questions. Not accusations, not conclusions, just questions. Why take that stance so openly? What was the intention behind it? And why does it feel like the people closest to Charlie had already been preparing themselves for something like this? Because if this was only about forgiveness, the reaction might have been quieter. It might not have spread the way it did. It might not have triggered this level of discussion across so many different spaces. But that's not what happened. Instead, it created a ripple effect that continues to grow. And that ripple effect is still expanding. Every new reaction adds another perspective. Every new discussion brings in another interpretation. Some people see strength in what Erika did. They believe it takes a certain mindset to respond that way in such a public setting. Others see it differently. They question the tone, the timing, and the message behind it. And that divide is what keeps the conversation alive. Because when people interpret the same moment in completely different ways, it creates ongoing tension. It keeps the discussion from settling. It ensures that new angles keep emerging, new ideas keep forming, and new questions keep being asked. And in a situation like this, where emotions are already high, that kind of dynamic doesn't fade quickly. At the same time, there's a growing sense that this moment might end up defining everything that comes next.
Never dated here because I saw vicariously through my roommate how terrible it was. Somehow getting drinks was the replacement of having coffee and breakfast. I personally would rather have coffee or brunch with someone than going, I don't drink. I find it unproductive, not because I'm holier than whatever. I just don't operate that way. But I always thought it was very strange how she would go to drinks with one guy and then go to dinner with another. So it goes twofold here. So if you're expecting to marry someone that I was blessed with, like a Charlie, you have to be the type of woman that will attract a Charlie. Are you going to church? Are you going to Bible study?
Did you tell your pastor that you are ready for the Lord to bring into your life the man that you've been praying for? You yourself need to be prepared for that man, and only you will know how to do that. Does that mean staying out and going out with the girl?
Not because of what was proven or confirmed, but because of how it was perceived. Because perception has power, it shapes narratives, it influences opinions, and it can shift the direction of an entire story. And right now, perception is still shifting. It hasn't settled into one clear understanding. Instead, it's moving, changing, evolving as more people engage with the story. Some are going deeper, analyzing every detail. Others are stepping back, trying to look at the bigger picture. But no matter how people approach it, one thing is clear. This isn't something that's going to disappear anytime soon. That's why attention remains so focused on what happens next. Because moments like this don't just exist in isolation. They lead to other moments. They open doors to new developments. And they often set the tone for everything that follows. So whether it's new statements, new reactions, or new information, people are watching closely. And as that continues, the pressure for clarity only increases. The more questions that are asked, the more people expect answers. The more perspectives that emerge.
To understand how to be a biblical woman in society. I think it was Elizabeth Elliot that said, being a woman does not make me a better Christian or a certain Christian, but being a Christian makes me a very different woman. And I think understanding, yes, your biblical role, but also like, be the woman that your future husband deserves. Like, be the woman that, God wants you to be. You don't have to be out partying. Don't, be crazy thinking like I'm running out of time when your God is the author of time.
The more important it becomes to understand what's really happening beneath the surface. And until that clarity comes, the conversation keeps going. Another important part of this is how quickly narratives can shift in today's environment. One moment can change everything. One statement can redefine how people see a situation. And once that shift happens, it spreads fast. Social platforms, discussions, reactions, it all moves in real time, creating a cycle where the story keeps evolving without pause. That's exactly what's happening here. The courtroom moment didn't just stay in that room. It moved outward, reaching more people, sparking more reactions, and building more momentum. And as that momentum continues, it becomes harder for the story to slow down. At the same time, there's also a level of uncertainty that adds to everything, because not all questions have answers right now. Not all details are fully understood. And that gap between what's known and what's unknown is where speculation can start to grow. That's why it's important to focus on what's actually been seen and heard, rather than jumping to conclusions. Still, even without clear answers, the impact of that moment is undeniable. It changed how people are looking at everything. It shifted the tone of the conversation, and it brought a level of attention that doesn't fade easily. Whether people agree or disagree with what happened, they're still engaged, and that alone says a lot. And then there's the long-term effect to consider. Because moments like this don't just influence the present, they can shape how the entire story is remembered. They become reference points, they become turning points, and they often end up being the moment people look back on when trying to understand how everything unfolded. So now the focus stays locked on the bigger picture, not just what happened, but what it means moving forward. Because the story isn't finished. It's still unfolding, still developing, still raising new questions with every passing moment. And at the center of all of it is that original scene, the courtroom, the statement, the reaction. Everything continues to trace back to that point. Everything continues to connect to it in some way. And until more clarity comes, that moment remains the key piece of the entire situation. So now the real questions carry even more weight. Why did Erika take that stance so publicly? What influenced that decision? And why does it feel like the people closest to Charlie had already been bracing for something like this long before it happened? Because if this was just about forgiveness, the reaction wouldn't feel this intense. It wouldn't have sparked this level of discussion. It wouldn't have created this many different perspectives all at once. So what is it really about? Drop your thoughts below and let's talk about it. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's been following closely, because this situation is still evolving and there's a lot more to unpack. Stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.